Okay, the next people that I am going to discuss is a guy named Malcolm Tent and his partner named Kathy Kelly. And they are the owners of Trash American Style. And that is a store that sold alternative clothes, music, books, collectibles, and decorations. And they also carried the line of Revelation Records. And that is a record label that featured punk rock, hardcore punk rock music. So on their website, most likely Malcolm Tent wrote a rather weak history about their store, which is Trash American Style. So I quote their website, Part 1, before the beginning. In the beginning, there was TPOS. In 1984, my band, Broken Talent, had a desperate need to put out a record. We went to our drummer's living room, had her brother put a couple of microphones near our instruments, and played our 3 good songs over and over again until we got them right. Then we took that tape to the local pressing plant, made 500 copies, and TPOS was whelped. 22 years and 126 releases later, we're still doing it. We put out what we like, and that's that. So I guess TPOS is Trash American Style's record label. So they made a demo tape in their living room, and then they're off to the record pressing plant to make 500 copies. So that's pretty good to have a garage band come up with a demo tape, and then you're off to go produce a record because you have the knowledge or the connections to the people that produce records. Some bands go their whole lives looking for a record deal. They just don't know how to do it. But Malcolm knows. You want a record deal, you just scoot over to the record pressing plant, and presto, you have a record and a record deal. And that is pretty good if you own a record shop. So that's almost like a writer. And he also owns a bookstore. So that's quite a way to move your books. That is a lot of power. Okay, back to their website. I quote, Part 2. Then there was Trash American Style. A couple of years later, Broken Talent broke up. I couldn't stand working my stupid job anymore, and Kathy couldn't stand hers. Florida was driving me nuts, and it wasn't doing Kathy any good either. Rather than stew in our own juices, we decided to pool our resources and make a break for it. A break from the tedium of the workday world, and a break from the dead-end sewer of Miami, Florida. We sold most of our worldly possessions, loaded the rest into a moving van, and hit the road heading north, destination Connecticut. We found a crappy old storefront in Brookfield, unloaded the remainder of our worldly possessions into it, and called the result Trash American Style. Trash blossomed and grew until 2.5 years later. We had so much underground culture that we needed a bigger flower bed for it all. We moved to Danbury, and 20 years later, there we were. End quote. So after recording his record for his band Broken Talent, he decides to pack it up in Florida and move to Connecticut, where he opens a record store. And again, that is a pretty good move if you are a musician, because a record store is a place where you could sell your records. And if you listen to his band called Broken Talent, I think you could find them on YouTube. They sound like an English punk rock band. So Malcolm Tent says on his documentary that they opened up their record shop in Brookfield, Connecticut in November of 1986. And what is funny is that Just by coincidence, my mother, younger brother, and I also moved to Brookfield around that same time. About 8 months later, we moved to Brookfield, Connecticut in the summer of 1987. So that happened when my parents got divorced, and my mother, younger brother, and I moved into a house owned by my stepfather named Wally Thiel. And he had a house in Brookfield, Connecticut that was located about 2 or 3 minutes away from Trash American Style. So the funny thing is that I would drive by Trash American Style 2 or 3 times a day. It was located on a little road called Station Road that was between North Mountain Road and Federal Road in Brookfield. There is an area called Four Corners in Brookfield, Connecticut, and they have a gas station on every corner. So Trash American Style was located right near Four Corners. So my family lived off of Candlewood Lake Road, almost on the New Milford border. So whenever we drove down to Route 7, whenever we had to drive down to the main road, we would pass Trash American Style. And as far as I remember, they had a little cardboard sign at that point that said trash. So here is a photograph of the building that they were in. And this is 20 Station Road. So the funny thing is this is how it appeared in the late 1980s. And this is a photograph that I took off of Realtor.com in 2021. And it said that this property had been listed for 18 days. So according to that website, this photograph was taken and then posted on Realtor.com in July of 2021. So this is how this building has appeared for 35 years. It hasn't changed a bit in 35 years. Now Brookfield, Connecticut is a somewhat expensive place to live. Around 1998 or 1999, I bought a condo in Brookfield for $85,000. I think those same condominiums are now selling for $250,000 or $300,000. That is how much the property values have gone up in Brookfield. So it's very funny that this piece of real estate on Station Road, I think it says it's on 1 or 2 acres. It's kind of funny that this piece of real estate would stay in this state of disrepair for 35 years. All around the whole area, they put in condo complexes. The property values have gone way up. So everything has been modernized, but this weird creepy building here called 20 Station Road. So Trash American Style, which is Malcolm Tent's record shop and Kathy Kelly's record shop, was just in one unit in this building. I think it was in this small storefront unit right here. All the rest of this building looked like it had a series of apartments, and over here is a garage. So just take a look at this building. They used to have a sign up here and it's boarded up. I think it was always like that. And in the back here it kind of looks like a garage or something like a small warehouse. So this is definitely an odd looking building. It's like a combination of a apartment building, a condo building, and some sort of industrial building. So whenever I drove by this building, there would never be anybody outside. You would never see people hanging out, leaning on their cars, talking to their friends. You would never see little kids running around. You would never see dad out there with the barbecue cooking hamburgers. You never see little kids playing in a plastic kiddie pool. You never see mom planting flowers. It was a ghost town. So on his documentary, Malcolm Tent states that every day after school, when Brookfield High School let out, all the kids would come over to see if the new record had been released at Trash American Style. And they would just come over and hang out and would make the scene. It was just a little happy scene over there, filled with kids that were into alternative music, punk rock. It was just a place where a bunch of musicians and people who are into alternative music hung out. This building was essentially in my neighborhood. I drove by this place 4 times a day since I was 12 years old. I want to tell you, there was nothing ever like that. This building was a ghost town. I remember when I first moved to Brookfield, I asked my mom what that was. I said, "What is trash?" And she says, "I don't know, I think it's a junk shop." But I never even saw people pulling up in their cars or getting in or out of their cars to go in there. And I've never been on the inside of that. But from what it looks like, it was a pretty small place. So I also went to Brookfield High School, and that was also a very conservative town. People, for the most part, were kind of like yuppies that went to Brookfield. A lot of the kids came from wealthy homes, and the last thing that kids were into in Brookfield High School was punk rock. I think there may have been about 10 kids that would be into punk rock music in the whole area. So the idea that this was some big hangout for kids that were into punk rock is some sort of fabrication. It's some sort of lie that Malcolm Tent is conjuring up. It seemed that that building was left in that state in order to deter customers. It seemed that they did not want attention to be placed on that building at all. It kind of looked like an abandoned building. That was the only storefront that appeared to have a store in it. Trash American Style was the only store in that building. Everything else looked like run-down apartments. I do not think they were boarded up in the late 80s and early 90s, but it was still run down. And once again, you never saw anybody hanging out at that building. You never saw anybody carrying groceries into their apartment or standing outside smoking a cigarette. It was like it was an abandoned building. And this is the worst building in Brookfield. This was the slums of Brookfield. Like I said, the property values in that area were very valuable. Whoever bought this building and left it in this state did it for a reason. So I'm going to guess that this building is something of a lodge for people who are involved with the U.S. military and the Freemasons. And what those outfits do is they buy old, cheap buildings. They buy old warehouses. They buy old, cheap buildings, which they keep to rent rooms out of to agents of the U.S. military. And they call these agents travelers. That is a code name in the Freemasons and in the U.S. military that are involved in MK Ultra programs. They call those agents travelers because they're continuously being moved around the country. Both the military and the Freemasons are constantly moving their people around the country to take part in destabilizing certain regions in America that the U.S. military and the large banks end up completely taking over. It's the U.S. military working for the English government. These banks are all owned by England. If you trace what bank is owned by what bank, you find that the largest banks from England own every other bank in America. And what they're involved with now is buying all the real estate in America. They're putting everybody out of work and they're buying all the private land. And they figured out ways to do it legally. So England owns American banks. So they figured out how to completely buy up all American real estate. And they have the US military assisting them. And they have the Freemasons assisting them. All the American Freemasons, of course, work for the English Freemasons. They will probably try to debate me, but the headquarters, the head of international Freemasonry, is based in England. So when they get people to join Freemasonic lodges, every Freemason is taking an oath to serve England. That is what Freemasonry is. It's an agency of England. So in order to destabilize all these different regions in America, they constantly have to move their people around the country for operations targeting the American public. And all these operations are concerned with putting people out of work, getting people to sell their private businesses, and killing masses of American citizens. So if you want to know what type of buildings some of these worst travelers live in, some of the worst people who are involved with this will live in buildings such as this. And once again, all the normal people will avoid locations like this. It's a deterrent. It looks creepy to them. There's no reason to go over there. It looks like an abandoned building. And on the other side of the coin, this is the type of building that certain kids will be notified that there's a cool punk rock record store at that sells cool t-shirts. This is a place that you go to for a cheap room to rent. Or if you have been recently made homeless because you lost your job, you might be attracted to go hang out behind a building like this, because for the most part it looks abandoned. And that is exactly what the Freemasons and the US military involved in MK Ultra, mind control, and gang stalking rituals are looking for. Once they destabilize certain areas, there is a large amount of homeless people. There are homeless kids. There are homeless people. There are people who are down on their luck. And those people become victims of these occult groups that practice human sacrifice rituals. It's their religion. And make no mistake about it, the people that do these things are Freemasons and part of the military. That's where they're taught to kill people in the US military. That is who they find out who develops a taste for it or a thirst for killing people. And the Freemasons are nothing but the occult. It's the occult side of religion. In the Freemasons, they get taught the real point of all their religions, the real point of human sacrifice, the real point of crucifying Jesus, the real point to drinking Jesus' blood or eating Jesus' body. All these weird symbolic things that are taught in all these mainstream religions, the Freemasons get taught that they are the inner group, and they get taught the real reason for all these symbolic practices and all these religions. They get to do it for real. They get to crucify people for real. They get to drink people's blood for real. They get to practice cannibalism for real. So when they have been exposed for these crimes, they are often called Satanists or satanic practices. But the truth is that they are just occult practices in all the mainstream religions. And the inner group to all the mainstream religions is Freemasonry. So this is the type of building that the Freemasons like to keep in an otherwise wealthy town. And they will keep it like this for 30 or 35 years. And guys like Malcolm Tent and Kathy Kelly will keep a little record shop, a little punk rock record shop in one of the units to attract all the youth in the area too, to a building like this. So if you are a cute kid and you go over to Trash American Style and you start talking to somebody working over there and you tell them that you're getting into fights with your mom and your dad and you're looking for a place to rent, the Freemasons might arrange for you to rent a room in a building like this. They may even have other tenants in this building that are around that person's age. And these other tenants might be drug dealers. They might be alcoholics that always have alcohol. They might be always throwing a party in a building like this. So some little cute punk rock chick gets in a fight with her mom, moves into a building like this, and that's the last her mom will ever see of that cute little punk rock chick. So some cute little punk rock kid may get in a fight with his parents, then get offered a room to rent in a building like this, where there's nothing but parties going on. There's nothing but drugs being sold. And about a month or two after that punk rock kid moves out of his house, that's the last his parents will ever see of him. So according to their website, trashamericanstyle.us, I guess they're international now, or they have a following in England, maybe. So according to their website, after a few years at this location, which is 20 Station Road in Brookfield, Connecticut, they moved to a more normal building in the nearby city of Danbury on the busy Mill Plain Road. So I eventually heard what Trash American Style really was from the kids at school. Where'd you get that music? Where'd you get that t-shirt? And they told me Trash American Style, and they told me how to get there. So I began to go to that location on Mill Plain Road in Danbury when I was around 15 years old in 1990. So I guess it got more popular at their new location. And Trash American Style was pretty much the only store in the area that had stuff on youth culture and alternative music. So when I would go there, I would usually see Malcolm Tent or Kathy Kelly running the place, and I'll buy t-shirts or tapes usually. But in the year 1993, when I was 17 years old, I had a girlfriend and she got pregnant. She told me she got pregnant. She had missed her period for a month or two. And some of my friends from Brookfield High School said, do you know that Trash American Style sells a tea, dried tea leaves, that could give a girl an abortion, a natural abortion, and that you drink this tea and it gives you a miscarriage, and it's all natural. So I asked my girlfriend, did you hear about this, and do you want to go see if they have it? Because she was talking about having an abortion. She did not want to keep the kid. And she said yes. So I went to Trash American Style, and Malcolm Tent told me to talk to Kathy about it. And Kathy said that she did not keep the tea on the shelf at the store, but she had it at home, and she would bring it in. If I wanted to come in a day or two, just call ahead and she would let me know if my order came in, and then I could come and get it. So I called up, she said she had it. I drove over there, and when I went to pay her for it, she said, no, you could just have it. And I thought it was because she was doing me a favor. But now that I think about it, when I'm older, I think that she did that so that there would be no receipt. There would be no record of purchase for that product at Trash. Because I gave it to my girlfriend, she brewed it like she was brewing coffee, and she drank it, and she said she had her period. And she said a lot of blood came out of her, including this. and she had a cellophane sandwich bag. And she showed me what looked like a piece of skin. It was about 1 inch long and like between 1/8 or 1/4 inch wide. And it was pink. So it looked like an inch long piece of skin in a cellophane bag. And she said that this came out of her after she started bleeding a lot. So I want to ask anybody, do you have any idea what that tea is? Have you ever heard of something like that? If so, that is pretty dangerous stuff to sell 17-year-old kids at a record shop. So I do not know why they would do that, but I bet it will not be for any type of humanitarian purposes, knowing these type of people in this area. They didn't do this out of the kindness of their heart. If any young person approached me now and said, I got my girlfriend pregnant, I would say, you need to go talk to your parents right now. So that was in 1993. So 4 or 5 years later, in the year 1997 or 1998, I am now with a different girl named Kim Smith. And we lived together in an apartment in New Milford, Connecticut. And there was an outdoor flea market called the Elephant's Trunk. So we went there one Sunday, and even though I did not know Malcolm too well, when I would go into Trash American Style, I would say hello to him, but it wasn't like we were on a first name basis with each other. I don't think he even knew my name. I maybe went in there once or twice a year. I did not go in there too often. So around 1997 or 1998, I am at the Elephant's Trunk flea market with my girlfriend named Kim. And as we're walking up one of the rows, I see Malcolm kind of drifting toward me. And he's noticed me from a ways away. And he's kind of shuffling and staring at me as he's shuffling forward. And he's kind of drifting toward me while staring at me. So it was like I had this tractor beam type thing, and he's kind of drifting toward me while staring at me. So he's going really out of his way to be noticed. So I say, hey, how are you doing? And I think he may have said something like, I haven't seen you at the store for quite some time. And he starts up a conversation with me. And like I said, I didn't know the guy. I really did not have anything to talk to him about. And he just wants to talk for like 15 or 20 minutes at the flea market about random things. And at that time, I thought that he must be really bored and really enjoy talking to people for him to do that. He never went out of his way to talk to me when I went into the store. He just treated me like any other customer. So why he went out of his way to talk to me for about 15 or 20 minutes, I didn't understand then. And after 20 minutes, I'm like, we really have to get going. And I made some excuse to kind of get away from him. So shortly after that, maybe a week or two later, I felt impelled to collect all of my weird wall decorations, which included paper, mache, and clay masks that I had bought in Mexico. It was Mexican artwork. I called them masks, but they were more wall hangings. They were masks to hang on the wall for decorations. And one looked like a green coyote, and another one looked like a skull. Half the face was a human, and the other half was a skull. And it was out of clay. And it was about as big as your hand. And it was something to hang on the wall. I also had one that looked like a sun. So I felt impelled to take all of the weird wall hangings that I had bought in Tijuana, in Mexico, and bring them into Trash American Style and trade them for audio tapes. So my girlfriend Kim had said that she did not like the ugly decorations because they were weird. So I said, I know what to do with them. I could bring them into Trash American Style and I could barter them. I could trade them for some music tapes. And that is what I did. So without trying to sound paranoid, that is how some of these mind control games will work with these Freemasons and military occultists. out of the blue, they will approach you somewhere like a flea market. They'll go out of their way to talk to you for 10 or 20 minutes, and a week or two later, you will be in their store wanting to give them your collection of Mexican artwork. So I'm sure that if Malcolm Tent never walked up to me at that flea market, it probably never would have occurred to me to go sell my Mexican artwork to Malcolm Tent. So to a lesser degree, that is a form of mind control. This is what they get off on concerning controlling people to do things. They often do this to get people to sell them an heirloom, to get people to sell them their business. So oftentimes these Freemasons understand the value of an old heirloom, of an old antique or collectible, and they do something like this, and they get the people to sell the heirloom at a very low price to these Freemasons who are involved in MK Ultra mind control programs. So the people sell an heirloom at a fraction of the real worth to these people who make it their job to rip people off. And like I said, they'll often be motivated to sell their houses or their businesses, and they'll often lose money. If you buy a house for $100,000 and you invest $60,000 into that house, that's $160,000 that you invested into that house. So you can't turn around and sell it to them at $130,000 and think that you've made any money. You've lost $30,000. If you buy a used car for $4,000 and you put in $2,000 or $3,000 worth of work, so now it is up to $7,000. You can't turn around and sell it for $5,000 and think you've made money. You've lost money. So that is a big game to these establishment Freemasons. People will buy something, invest a lot of money into it. They won't add it up. They won't do the math, and they'll end up selling it at a loss. This is how they rip people off. This is how they hurt people financially. This happens all of the time. So that was what a guy like Malcolm Tent was doing when I was 21. So these guys do this all day long. It's a game to them. They're just so smart, ripping off the American public and destabilizing their country. So I guess around the same time, around the late 90s, I went into Trash American Style one day and I just saw Kathy working there, and I asked where Malcolm was. So I needed to ask him a question. And she said, yeah, he's here, but you're going to have to give him a few minutes. So I said, okay. And I just started looking around the store. So about 2 or 3 minutes later, Malcolm appeared, and his eyes were bloodshot, like red. And it appeared as if he had been sleeping. And he was in a bad mood, most likely because he had just been woken up. And he had to come and see what I wanted. And I just had some dumb question about a music tape or a book. So he looked a little bit angry. And he answered the question and he walked off. So I want everybody to remember that, because that is an important detail on something that is coming up. So on a side note, that day Malcolm Tent was no longer real friendly. He didn't want to talk for 15 or 20 minutes like he did when he saw me at that flea market. He kind of walked up, his eyes were bloodshot, he looked like he just had been woken up. He was sleeping somewhere close by, and he had been summoned by me, and he wanted to see what I wanted, and I had some trivial question which may have irritated him, and then he walked off. So again, many years go by, and it is now the year 2006, and I now live in Waterbury, Connecticut with my wife named Rachel. So I would occasionally go into Trash American Style around the year 2006 and 2007 whenever I would be in Danbury. So I guess around 2007, I decided to stop at Trash American Style, and I see a big sign out front that says going out of business. And that surprised me because he had been there for something like 17 years. And it was the only shop like that in the area. I don't know of any other shop like that in Connecticut. And he was so successful that he even had commercials on TV. Around the mid-90s, I would see Malcolm Tent on TV doing a trash American style commercial on regular TV. I would see these on TV all the time. So I thought he was doing pretty good. And he was doing pretty good. So I said, why are you going out of business? I thought you were doing pretty good. And he goes into this little act. And he looks up at the ceiling. And he says, my landlord. And he's pointing at the ceiling with both of his fingers. I could just strangle him. And he starts gesturing to the ceiling like he is strangling somebody. But he's not angry. It's this fun little act that he's putting on. My landlord, I could just strangle him. He's doing a little dance. After 17 years of being a model tenant, he's kicking me out. And I said, well, why don't you just open another store somewhere else? And he says, nah, it's over. But if you go to our website, we still have the mail order thing going on. You can still get whatever you want, but it'll have to be through the internet and through the mail. So I said, oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry you're losing your place. I kind of walk into the store, and somebody walks in right behind me, and it's a lady. And she asked the same question as I. You're going out of business? And Malcolm instantly goes into the same exact act. He says, yes, my landlord. And he starts pointing toward the ceiling. I could just strangle him. I could just strangle him. After 17 years of being a model tenant, he's kicking me out. And he's doing the same exact little gig.
First time in 21 years we've had something like this.
So he's quite a showman. It was it was all very dramatic. So that was the reason, according to Malcolm, why he was closing his shop. It was all his landlord's fault, who was somewhere upstairs. He was the man upstairs. He was some omniscient force upstairs that was calling all the shots for Malcolm. Malcolm just had nothing to do with deciding to close his store and not open anywhere else. So a year or two later after that, after he moved out, I drove by and I saw that Trash American Style had been converted to a lighting and a bathroom fixture outlet. They sold like new lights and new bathroom fixtures. And the whole front of the store was glass. And you could see that there were 2 floors with a staircase running from the ground floor where Trash was up to the 2nd story. So whoever opened up a lighting and bathroom fixture outlet decided that they could use the floor on the upstairs as well to create a bigger store. So you could see easily that the unit that Trash was in was actually a 2-floor unit with a staircase joining both floors. So when Trash American Style was there, they only had their stuff on the bottom floor. And according to Malcolm, his evil landlord would dwell in the upstairs area, you know, secretly pulling the strings for Trash American Style, secretly directing everything that was happening there. So when I saw that, I remembered that day when I walked into a store and only Kathy was there. And I said, is Malcolm around? Where is Malcolm today? And she said, he's here, but you have to give him a few minutes. And then he appeared looking like he had just been woken up. So I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to theorize that quite possibly Malcolm was in the area upstairs. Quite possibly that was an apartment or some sort of lounge. I would guess more like an apartment where Malcolm lived. And that would make it very convenient for him to work at Trash American Style downstairs. There wasn't much of a commute. That sounds like something that may appeal to some people who are store owners. That sounds like something that may appeal to some people who are store owners. I think after all, the whole concept of a storefront had to do with somebody living in the back and having a store in the front. So I personally think that that is a good idea for people to do that. You could work from home and do all the other things that you have going on. And when a customer comes in, you'll hear the chime or you'll see them pull up and then you'll know to go in the front. So these Freemasons definitely know how to make things work well for themselves. But they're not going to tell anybody about that. It's all a big secret. It's some landlord dwelling upstairs in that upstairs room up there that is kicking him out. But he wanted it completely shut down. So to make things even clearer, I have a very good documentary called Hardcore Exposed. And I recommend everybody watch that video to fully understand the underground punk scene in Connecticut and New York, because the main distributor for the music was Trash American Style, run by Malcolm Tent. So Hardcore Exposed is an excellent documentary to watch to learn how large record companies, huge corporations, want to control everything, even the underground punk scene. A bunch of kids playing in garage bands. Huge corporations insist on controlling even that. That is how out of control the tyrannical English government is. That is how out of control the Freemasons are. They are a bunch of greedy, sadistic control freaks who need to control even a bunch of kids playing in garage bands in high school and college. The English government, the US military, and the Freemasons even have to micromanage all of that. So instead of trying to tell you all again, I would recommend you watch the video Hardcore Exposed, and it will explain how these large record companies like Virgin Records and Caroline Records control the underground music scenes, control the local music scene in every state. And they need distributors. They need record outlets that appear like underground record shops that sell alternative music. They need shops like Trash American Style to do it. So at a certain point, around 2007, the word came down from Virgin Records in England to tell Malcolm to close Trash American Style. And he was more than happy to do that and just run his mail order business through the internet. So I think that much like Revelation Records, which was owned by Caroline Records, which was owned by Virgin Records from England, I think that Trash American Style was also owned by Virgin Records, and Malcolm Tent was hired as the manager. So again, this is a way that corporations, large corporations, take over American society by not letting any grassroots or normal musicians or artists or writers ever succeed. They only want their insiders to do that. And their insiders are Freemasons. Their insiders are military agents who are not even Americans. A lot of these musicians in America are probably from England. They speak with an American accent. They say they're from America, but the truth is that they are from England. So when you watch the documentary, Hardcore Exposed, keep that in mind. All of the musicians that are aligned with Revelation Records may actually be English. and Malcolm Tent, who supposedly owned the distributor, the Revelation Records distributor called Trash American Style, may also be British. The name Malcolm is a very English name. Malcolm is a very popular name in England. So I would not be surprised to learn that Malcolm Tent is actually from England. So when you listen to Malcolm Tent's band called Broken Talent, I found them on YouTube. They sound like an English punk rock band. And as he wrote on the Trash American Style website, they went from recording their demo tape right in someone's living room directly to the record pressing plant and had a record produced. So it sounds like Malcolm Tent was some sort of record company insider. I want to mention a few other things about Malcolm Tent that I forgot to mention before about the nature of Malcolm Tent. So one day I walked into his store. I may have been around 19 years old at that time. So it was around the mid-90s. So I walk into Trash American Style and I see Malcolm standing there. And I say, hello, how are you? And I just walk into the store. And he had the stereo on. And he says, do you know who's playing right now? And he was playing something that sounded like metal. Some more modern sounding punk music. And I listened for a second and I said, no, I don't know who that is. And he named an old school hardcore band. And he said something like, that's Gorilla Biscuits. So old school hardcore has a very unique sound. In hardcore music, they used a lot of low, bass sounding chords. In metal, it is more of a high-pitched sound. But hardcore was kind of a more bass sounding chords. It was more of a grungy sound. So I thought about it and I realized that he was lying. That he was playing something that sounded like metal. And he told me that it was actually some old school hardcore band. So I do not know why he would lie about that. Why he would play that game. It just suggests a little bit about the character of Malcolm Tent as being somebody that you cannot trust and doesn't take even hardcore music seriously. He's going to lie to his customers about what music he is playing at his record shop. So it shows that Malcolm Tent doesn't have respect even for his own life's work. If I had a bookshop and somebody walked in and I said, let me read you a passage to a book, and they say, who is that? To turn around and lie to them and tell them it's a different writer or author. It suggests something of a psychological problem with Malcolm Tent. That is not normal behavior, especially for somebody who's really into music. So what that suggests to me is that he is something of a frontman. When it comes down to it, Malcolm is a frontman. Running a record shop is just a job for Malcolm. Freemasons have gone out of their way to put all the independent record shops out of business. And if there are a few remaining, they're occupied by men like Malcolm Tent, who is going to lie to his customers, even about the music that he's playing at his record shop. It shows that he has no respect at all, even for the music that he spends his life marketing and distributing. It's just a big joke to Malcolm Tent. So I looked up Malcolm Tent in 2019 and I saw that he had a YouTube channel. And on that YouTube channel, Malcolm Tent was playing guitar and he was doing a cover for an old hardcore song. And the song's name is Hold Your Ground. And it said on the video, Malcolm Tent doing a cover for the hardcore band Bold, their song called Hold Your Ground. So again, Hold Your Ground is a song by the band Gorilla Biscuits. It's by Gorilla Biscuits. It's not by the band Bold. So of course Malcolm knows that. It was his business to memorize every band and every song released by Revelation Records. He knows the difference between songs written by Bold and songs written by Gorilla Biscuits. He knows the difference. So why is he going out of his way on YouTube to mislead people and saying that he's doing a cover for the song Hold Your Ground by Bold? So I looked it up just now, and he has now changed the title, and it now reads correctly, Hold Your Ground by Gorilla Biscuits. So why is Malcolm going out of his way to confuse anybody going on YouTube, anybody visiting his channel on YouTube? So around 2019, somebody was uploading a bunch of different hardcore music, but they were misidentifying it all. They were uploading music from Judge, and they were saying that was Chain of Strength. They were uploading music from No for an Answer, the band No for an Answer, and they were calling that Chain of Strength. So I'm going to guess that a lot of that was done by Malcolm Tent. So it became like a game for Malcolm, the overlord of Revelation Records. He was the distributor and the controller for the Revelation Records outlet. So after 2007, they no longer needed an outlet for Revelation Records with the internet. So with the internet, they no longer needed a record store outlet. They no longer needed a record store outlet. That is the vision for the future. There'll be no stores but Walmart and Costco and Home Depot. There'll be no independent stores at all. There'll be no villages. There'll be no downtowns. The word downtown will be gone. If you're going out, you're going to Walmart. That's the only reason people will have in the future to go out, because they're going to Walmart. Then they could go back to their little apartment, their little prison cell, and they could order whatever they need online. So that is the vision for the future. Not that the internet is bad, but what is bad is their attack on anything independent. Any independent small businesses have been taken over by the criminal establishment, these large corporations that have been merged with the different militaries. That is the new government. Huge corporations and huge militaries. And their target and their enemies is the independent businessman, is the independent record store owner, is the middle class American. That is their enemy. And they find that it is so much easier to control the internet than to control reality. It's hard to control every piece of information in a physical library, but they could easily change the internet and limit everybody's information. Guys like Malcolm, working with huge corporations like YouTube, could easily hide any YouTube channel they want, any video they want, and they could quickly alter whatever videos they need to appear on whatever search you do on YouTube. And you get guys like Malcolm Tent who think it's all a big game, and he somehow has the power by lying to everybody else and twisting information around. It's all a big mind control game by men like Malcolm Tent, this weird lisping little man here. Let's play a segment from Malcolm Tent.
What blows my mind to this day is the sheer number of people who will come up to me and say, you know, you saved my life when I was in high school. You got me through high school. Like one of my most cherished moments at the store, and I wish I'd taken a picture of this, a totally random assortment. We had a couple of kids who were like diehard metalheads, a couple of straight edgers, a couple of deadheads, a couple of parents, some older dudes, all just random.
So when men like this are given power over others, he's going to lie, cheat, and steal. and probably a lot worse when he gets together with his Freemason and military buddies. He looks like a wholesome, kind of dorky, independent record guy here. And then you have these photographs here, taken of Malcolm Tent with his band. You can see a different expression on his face here. This may be the real Malcolm coming out. Let's just zoom in on his face here. Then we can take a good look at his close buddies here. These are Malcolm's band members, and they look equally psychotic. Something looks wrong with these men. Again, they may know how to play instruments, but if you take a good look at their faces, my guess is that their life's ambition may be something other than writing songs or forming a band. So that's the problem with all these Freemasons and these military lunatics taking control, is that everything that they do to kind of emulate normal things in public and human society is all done as a front, and they have ulterior motives for it all. They want to take over the entire music scene, not just because they want the spotlight, not just because they want everybody's money, but because they want to destroy any real musicians who actually have talent, any real musicians that actually have a love for what they are doing. They have a love for music, and it comes through with the best music, with excellent music. And these military lunatics know that. And these Freemasonic scumbags know that. And when it comes to a comparison of these guys and some real band somewhere that's playing music for the love of music, these guys start to look as exactly as they are. This is a band of military Freemasonic zombies over here. And I wish I had a picture of some real guys somewhere, but once again, that's not allowed. We're not allowed to see the real guys that play some real music and have the best music. We have to look at these zombies over here, because the only thing they want to do is crush everybody real, because they hate everybody real. They're not playing music because they love music. They're not playing music for the love of music. They're playing music to take over the music scene, to keep down all of the real musicians. Because as soon as the American public takes a look at the real guys, they're not going to want to buy any records from the zombies over here anymore. And the only thing that these zombies want to do is hurt and destroy people. And it shows. So they will be installed in every place in American society, in the government, in the media, in the corporations, in politics, in Hollywood, in the local bands, running the corner record store. There will be no independent businesses whatsoever. If they could have it their way, you wouldn't be able to mow people's lawns for a living. These control freak psychotics need to micromanage everything to the point that nothing is real. It's all them. It's nothing but hate. It's nothing but destruction. It's nothing but the fakes. It's nothing but the criminal zombie herd.
sun. Run over it. 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 Run over it.
So next I want to discuss somebody who I believe that worked with Malcolm Tint. And I knew him as a teenager in Brookfield, Connecticut. In fact, he lived in New Milford, Connecticut. I lived on the border of Brookfield and New Milford, Connecticut. And he lived in New Milford, but he was in the same neighborhood as I was. So you may know him as the reporter named Anderson Cooper. And Jeff Pearce, also known as Anderson Cooper, is also an actor named Logan Marshall Green. So I first met him when I was around 13 or 14 years old. And he told me that he was the same age as I was. But if you look up Anderson Cooper on Wikipedia, it says he was born in the year 1967. So he is actually about 8 years older than I. So when I was 14, Anderson Cooper, also known as Jeff Pearce, was actually 22 years old. So what people have to understand is that the military uses children in their late teens and early 20s to befriend, manipulate, control, and abduct children from regular families. That is how so many kids are kidnapped. When you hear of all these kidnappings, it is actually organized crime that does it. And these pedophile kidnapping rings are controlled by the MK Ultra program in the US military and through organizations like the Freemasons. The Freemasons being like a secret club that they're all a part of, that they all take an oath of secrecy to. So these kidnapping rings in the US military find that what works best for them is to employ agents that are in their early 20s who will go out on some block or to some teen center and say that they are 14 and 15-year-old kids. But the truth is that they are a lot older. And the military often uses people that are short-statured to do this. They use people that are very small to do this. And that makes it easier for them to pass as kids. All they have to do is dress like a 14-year-old kid. And these 20-year-old people can do it. So what they find is what works best for the military is if they have young people in their early 20s going out to play on the block with these 14-year-old kids. That way these older kids have more control over the younger ones. The older ones have more life experience. And of course they are usually more intelligent. So they get a 20-something-year-old guy who is about 5 feet tall. And they give him a kid's clothes. And he'll fit in with all the young 15-year-old kids on the block. So that is exactly what they did with Jeff Pearce, also known as Anderson Cooper, also known as Logan Marshall Green. When he was 20-something years old, they introduced him as some 14-year-old kid who lived down the street from me. So through these operations, the military will find out who is very good at acting, who has no problem playing these roles of a good-natured or streetwise kid from the block. They'll have to pick up certain accents too. Wherever they go, they might have to do a southern accent. They might have to have a New York accent. They'll have to act like somebody from that area. So they need their agents that are involved in abducting children to be pretty good actors. And these are the same type of people that they're going to want to use on TV, in film, and on the news as media personalities and even politicians. So they are also very good at changing their looks using wigs, contact lenses, and a sophisticated makeup system where they're actually changing how their face appears with something like parts of a mask that they apply to their face and then use makeup over it, like in a Hollywood studio, a makeup studio. So when a corrupt military takes over a society, they need a whole legion of fakes who are good at acting and covering up what they are. So when the military is involved with taking over every branch of the government, the military will also be involved in taking over every aspect of society. And that includes social scenes. That includes counterculture movements. That includes youth culture. And that includes, of course, your children and your families. When a military wants to destabilize an area, they consider part of that area valuable due to its human resources. They'll take over your farms. They'll take over your equipment. They'll take over your land. They'll take over your business. They'll take over your artwork and your collectibles. They'll take over your estate. And they also want to take over your children. And these are very sick men that want to use children for sex. And then they kill these kids in snuff films and these murder rituals. And this has gone back into ancient times. If it wasn't for this, these types of people would be bored. They love the act of setting up real people, abducting them, and then killing them. That is their entertainment. That is their meaning to life. They are addicted to doing that. So it doesn't surprise me that Jeff Pearce was not a 14-year-old kid back in 1989, but was actually a 22-year-old man who would go on to become a reporter and an actor and probably play dozens of other roles in the establishment. So I hung out with Jeff Pearce on and off through my teenage years, and I'll have a couple of reports concerning Jeff Pearce and some other kids we hung out with in Brookfield and New Milford, Connecticut in the early 1990s. But concerning Jeff Pearce's connection to Malcolm Tent, I have a very important story concerning a trip to New York City. So in 1992, when I was 16 years old, Jeff Pearce, also known as Anderson Cooper, from now on, I am going to refer to him as Jeff Pearce. So he asked to borrow a few tapes from me that were punk rock and hardcore mixtapes. And he said he liked that music and he was interested in that music. So I told him that if he liked hardcore punk, there was a store in Danbury called Trash American Style that had a lot more hardcore and punk music. He should go over there. So sometime later, around the summer of 1992, Jeff Pearce calls me up and he says, come over to my house because I have something that I want to show you. And when I got there, his whole room was filled with records, music records. He had something like a dozen milk crates lined up all over his room, each filled with dozens of records, to the point that there wasn't any room in his room for anything but that. So he said he had gone to Trash American Style and he had bought almost the entire line of records released by Revelation Records, which Malcolm Tent was a distributor for. So he showed me that he even had the rare records from Revelation Records. He had a record from the band called Judge, and it was entitled Chung King Can Suck It LP. And that is an insult to the Chung King recording studios in New York City. And it was a joke that the band made. So there was only a few records made for this LP. And due to that, they are very rare and very valuable. And he had that record. And that record sells for thousands of dollars. And he also had records that were colored green, or colored blue, or colored red. They weren't black vinyl. And he said that these were limited releases. Something like a collectible released by Revelation Records for serious collectors. So I think he said he bought the entire Revelation record collection with the exception of 2 records. He was short only 2 records to have the complete set. So I thought that that was a little extreme to go from owning no hardcore music to owning the entire Revelation Records collection. But I guess at that time, he just took a liking to hardcore music. He also took some of his records and made me a few audio tapes that he recorded off of his records. And he even typed out the lyrics. So he gave me 3 or 4 audio cassettes and pages of the typed out hardcore lyrics. And I said, thank you, but where are my hardcore mixes that I loaned you? And he looked down and said, I lost those. So I do not think he wanted to give those back. They had been mixes of some older hardcore music from like the early 80s. And most of those were New York bands. And I had a few mixtapes, so he did not want to give those back. But instead he recorded some of his Revelation records onto audio cassettes. And he gave me 3 or 4 of those. And then he went on to say that a lot of kids that I know claim to be interested in hardcore music, but they are not, because they don't know anything about the bands and they don't even know what lyrics are being said. So that is why he typed out all the lyrics for me, so I would know exactly what they are saying in their songs. Because in hardcore music, they do a lot of shouting, so you cannot always hear what they are saying. But he had a air of superiority, like he was talking down to whatever kid liked a few punk rock hardcore songs. But that was not enough compared to guys that own the whole Revelation Records collection. They were the true fans. They were the worthy few that truly knew about the bands, that were the true hardcore kids. Not these other kids that just might like a few hardcore songs here and there. So I noticed that he sounded a little bit like Malcolm Tent. Like how I walked into Trash American Style one day and he says, do you know what song is playing? And I said, no. And then he lied and he told me a band was playing that wasn't. Because what did I know? I did not live, breathe, and you know what, hardcore, day and night. So I was just a little jerk that they should lie to and mess with. So that was the attitude that Jeff Pearce also picked up by some of the stuff that he was saying. And I thought it was a little bit funny because he hadn't heard of hardcore a few months before. And now not only does he own the whole record collection, he's now talking down to anybody who doesn't like hardcore as much as he does. So it looked like he joined Malcolm Tent's little cult of hardcore superiority. Malcolm Tent's little club of Revelation Records superiority. So sometime later, also in the summer of 1992, Jeff Pearce calls me up on the phone and he says that he has planned a trip to CBGB's, which is an old punk rock club in New York City. I think that it is somewhere near the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It's located on a street called the Bowery, B-O-W-E-R-Y. It's just called the Bowery. So it was big in the 1980s with punk music and then hardcore music. But I think that they did not like the hardcore mosh pits or the stage diving. And so they eventually shut down around 1990. So I told him that. I heard CBGB's had closed. And he says, I know that, but you could still go down there and see it. The building is still there. I just want to see the old location before it completely turns into something else. That was one of the major landmarks in punk rock hardcore. Don't you want to see it? And I said, sure. And he said, I have all the directions and I've planned a trip out. So I'll pick you up this Friday and we'll go down to the city. So we took his car and we drove to Stamford, Connecticut, I'm pretty sure. And from Stamford, Connecticut, we took the train into Grand Central Station in New York City. So for people that don't know, CBGB's was a punk rock club that was big in the 1980s. But I had always heard that it closed in 1990, around 1990. And I never heard of it opening again through the 90s. But if you look on the internet right now, they say that it did open in the 1990s again and hosted many alternative shows. And they named a few alternative rock bands that were big in the 1990s, the mid to late 1990s. So I've never heard of it opening again in the 1990s. But according to their website on the internet, they claim that it opened throughout the 1990s to host punk and alternative shows. So if anybody knows the real story about CBGB's being open all through the 1990s, or if it actually just closed, make a video about what you know, or at the least leave a comment. So what is happening is that the internet is filled with disinformation from the US military. They are essentially trying to rewrite everything, especially the underground music scene in the US. So Jeff Pearce picked me up on a Friday and we drove into Stamford, Connecticut, and we got on a train, and that train went to Grand Central Station in Manhattan in New York City. And from there we walked and got on a subway. And since Jeff Pearce had told me that he planned the whole trip out, he had already figured out all the directions, I did not really pay attention to what subway line that we got on or what street that we got off the subway on. I just kind of trusted Jeff Pearce knew which way to go. So we always acted like a studious kid who was always pretty serious. And he supposedly got very good grades in school. So I really did not have any reason to distrust him. But now that I look back at the situation, as a 46-year-old man, I can easily see that the whole situation was nothing but another setup by this criminal organization called the Freemasons and the US military. So when we got off of the subway and started walking down a street, I remember it was a crowded street with lots of people on it. And there were many stores filled with clothes and music and all the things that New York City would sell. New York City has always been notorious for having the best clothes, especially for young people, and having all the things that don't make it up into the more rural areas like Brookfield and Danbury, Connecticut. So I was pretty happy to be walking down a crowded street in New York City and checking out just dozens of stores, all with different new clothes and music and everything that we didn't have back in Connecticut. So I looked over and Jeff is staring at me with a look of disdain in his eyes, like he is just irritated with me. And I say, what's wrong? He says, we have to get to CBGB's and you're stopping at all these stores. So I said something like, that club is closed anyway, so I don't know why you want to rush and get over there. He was in this big rush to get to that closed club, and he did not like the fact that I just didn't want to rush to get over there. So I noticed that his personality had changed. He seemed entirely different. He seemed older. He wasn't smiling or acting carefree. He was looking at me with disdain. He was looking at me as if he did not like me. So I just said, fine, let's not stop at any more stores and let's hurry over to CBGB's. I had just stopped in 1 or 2 stores and that was enough to irritate Jeff. So I saw that for some reason this was a big deal to him. So I did not want to hold this up for him. After all, he seemed to be taking this hardcore punk thing very seriously. So we start walking, and we walk for a half hour or so, and we wind up in this area of New York City that is a ghost town. There are a bunch of buildings in this area, but there are no cars parked on the street. There are no cars driving past us. It is just completely empty. And they look like office buildings that are connected to garages or warehouses. And the area is not run down. It's just empty. And there's no names on the buildings. They just have numbers, if anything. And if you look in, there's no lobbies. It just looks like industrial buildings. And there's no people walking around this area. There's not too many cars driving past. So we get to this area of New York City that is like a ghost town. There are many buildings in this area, and a lot of them seem like they're connected to garages or warehouses, and they are more modern buildings. They do not look old or run down, but there is just very little traffic driving past, and there are barely any cars parked on the side of the road. And there's nobody walking around. There's nobody walking on the sidewalks. There is nobody walking in or out of these buildings. And these buildings do not have lobbies with people sitting at a desk in the front that you could see through windows. They look like industrial buildings. And for some reason, the whole place is deserted. So if anybody knows New York City, let me know what part of New York City this may have been in. CBGB's is in the Bowery, and the Bowery is supposedly part of the Lower East Side. So if this description of that area does not sound correct, please let me know, because I do not know New York City very well at all. So once we get to this rural area, Jeff Burke says that he is lost. He does not know where he is. He cannot find CBGB's, and he is acting very irritated at this point. And around this time, he is walking very quickly, way ahead of me. So I am walking at a normal, fast pace, but he is just making a point to walk faster than me. No matter how fast I walk, he wants to walk kind of ahead of me. So I can tell that he's pissed off. So he is like 10 or 15 feet in front of me. So after a half hour or 45 minutes of kind of walking in circles, Jeff Burke finds CBGB's. I vaguely remember seeing a sign that said CBGB's. I cannot remember if it was on a canopy or if it was just a sign. So Jeff is hurrying toward this building with the CBGB sign on it. And he's walking toward it, and he gets halfway across the street, and he weakly gestures at it. He kind of jerks his arm toward the building with this weird look on his face. And as he points to it, he spins 180 degrees and starts walking back the way he came. Once again with this very unusual look on his face. It was a mix of disdain with kind of a confused or dumb look on his face. So he basically looks at it for no more than 2 seconds. Literally 2 seconds. And he's off walking the other way. So what that tells me is that he had no interest in CBGB's whatsoever. He did not care about CBGB's at all. He did not want to walk over and try to look through the glass. He did not want to take any photographs. He did not want to stand there for a minute or two and look around the area. He wanted to get out of there 1 second after we arrived. He did not even want to walk up toward the building. He wanted to get close enough to point at it before he turned around and went the other way. And we were there for such a short amount of time. I don't even remember what it looked like, with the exception of it had a sign that said CBGB somewhere. So he starts hurrying the other way, once again making a point to walk ahead of me, not walk next to me, as if he did not like me, as if he had no use to stand next to me or make conversation like he usually did. There was no need to put on his act anymore. He was pissed off, he was confused, and my guess is that some sort of plan that was made failed. Some sort of arrangements that had been made by certain unseen parties failed. And Jeff was irritated, pissed off, confused, and dumb. He looked a little autistic at that point. So at that time, when I was 16, I thought that Jeff was always kind of like a little bit of a loser. I enjoyed hanging out with him when we were younger, when I was like 14. But now that I was 16, I was getting a little older. This guy was a bum out to hang out with. He made the whole trip to New York City miserable. He got to New York City and he didn't want to go into any of the stores. He did not want to hang out in any of the crowded sections and check out the girls or check out the people. As soon as we got off the subway, he got pissed off that I went into 1 or 2 stores. He wanted to get to this empty CBGB's location, and as soon as he got there, he did not even want to go up to the building. He just wanted to jerk his arm at it and then turn around and walk the other way. So all of this suggests somebody who has ulterior motives for going to New York City. None of this makes any sense. It wasn't my idea to go to New York City. I didn't call him up and say, hey, come with me to New York City. He was all enthusiastic about going. He made all the plans to go. He went out of his way to invite me to go with him. And as soon as we got down there, he turns into a pissed off, robotic, and autistic who acts unusual the whole time. So that was the real Jeff. That's the real Anderson Cooper. So I want to thank my higher power. I want to thank my guardian angels for seeing to it that I was able to leave New York City that day and didn't wind up in some weird warehouse somewhere in this isolated section of New York City, in this ghost town area of New York City. I want to thank my guardian angels for getting me out of that one. So I want to tell everybody about Anderson Cooper, also known as Logan Marshall Green, also known as Jeff Pearce, who when he was in his mid-20s said he was a 16 or 17-year-old kid from my block. And this is the type of stuff that this individual does when he lures you down to New York City. So thank God that it did not get worse. So I'm going to do my part and report this. So the last thing I want to make clear is that when Jeff Pearce said that he was lost, we continued to walk around the area for about a half hour or 40 minutes before he found CBGB's. So I don't think that he was really lost. I just think that he was trying to bide some time, or he didn't know what to do because somebody wasn't down there. Something did not happen as planned, and he did not know what to do. So when their plans failed, he walked over to CBGB's, quickly pointed at it, and then it was time to leave the city. The only thing that I can say about that trip was that I thank God that it did not get a whole lot worse. So I want to show a picture of Jeff Pearce dressed up like a female. So Jeff Pearce is a homosexual. So when he was in his early to mid-20s, he liked hanging out with 15-year-old kids. He liked hanging out with 15-year-old boys. So Jeff Pearce, also known as Anderson Cooper, also known as Logan Marshall Green, would be a perfect agent for the MK Ultra program. He's gay. He doesn't want to get a girlfriend, get married, have kids, have a normal life. He wants to join a secret society. Guys like him want to join a secret society with like-minded people who have other ambitions other than getting a good job, finding a good woman, filling their lives with meaningful things, working hard, raising their children. They want to join a men's club and play dress up like old English military men, put on all their regalia and badges and medals and look like some old captain or colonel from England, put on their aprons and prance around their Freemasonic lodges, saying these are our rituals, saying you can check us out on TV. These are our rituals. We walk around the room in a parade. Some guy brings in an American flag. We all salute it. Then we sit down and a fat guy walks in and sings an opera song for us. Then it's coffee hour afterwards or a pasta dinner and we all eat spaghetti and garlic bread and then we go home. We don't know what's the big deal. We just showed you one of our secret rituals. We don't know what the big deal is with everybody distrusting us and all this bad press saying that we're involved in some sort of conspiracy and have secret rituals. So Jeff Pearce would fit right in with guys that want to be a part of something like that. So I want to mention one more time for the record, directly before Jeff Pearce suggested this trip to New York City, he invited me over his house and showed me that he had acquired the entire Revelation record collection from Trash American Style that is run by Malcolm Tent. And he started criticizing everybody else who isn't up to his caliber of being a collector and knowing all about hardcore punk music. He sounded very much like he was under the influence of Malcolm Tent. And then he called me a few weeks later and said, I want to go to the historic punk rock landmark, the CBGB's Club in New York City, and I want you to come with me. And he was very enthusiastic, and he was very friendly, and he was very optimistic. But as soon as we get down there, he changes and acts like a hateful, agitated, pissed off kid that did not want to enjoy a trip to New York City at all. So on the way back, I don't think we said two words to each other. He didn't say anything to me, and at that time, I thought that he had gotten embarrassed because he had gotten lost for a half hour or 40 minutes, and that was some blow to his ego, and he was in a real bad mood due to that, and that ruined his whole trip. That's what I thought when I was 16. I could not make any sense out of it other than that. So I just left him alone. I didn't say anything. He was in a bad mood. I'm just leaving the kid alone. So that was the last time I hung out with Jeff Pearce. I saw him once or twice after that in passing. I saw him on the street in our neighborhood, driving by on a golf cart one day. And I think I may have saw him at a club called the Boardwalk in Brewster, New York at some point. But I'm pretty sure that is the last time I hung out with Jeff Pearce. So when I saw him, I think it was at the Boardwalk Club in Brewster, New York. Or maybe it was somewhere like the mall. I had a short conversation with him. And I said something like, did you ever get those last two records that you needed to complete your Revelation Records collection? And he looked down as if he was disgusted. And he said, no, I didn't. In fact, I sold it all back to Trash. I said, which ones? He said, all of them. I said, you sold all those records back to Trash? He goes, yes. I said, you sold every record that you bought back to Trash American Style? And he said, yes. And I said, why? He said, I don't know, I just got sick of them. So that is pretty interesting that Malcolm Tent would sell all the Revelation records to Jeff Pearce, and then a few months or a year later would buy them all back. So I don't know if somebody wants to translate how that works out, but I guess it is something like a stock or a commodity or an antique that is bought and sold several times to different collectors. But for some reason, Malcolm wants to first distribute Revelation Records, and then he wants to buy it all back. So Malcolm may be the head collector. Oftentimes, if people have a small record shop and they sell records, or they sell something at a shop and they make a big sale and they sell a lot of their inventory, they're not going to want to buy it all back again within the year. So Malcolm Tint is buying and selling Revelation Records like it's some sort of stock on Wall Street. So this guy is less an independent entrepreneur and he's more of some sort of broker on Wall Street. And instead of buying and selling Microsoft stock, he's buying and selling Revelation Records, something like a stock. So this guy is a businessman. This guy probably also works on Wall Street. This is probably a cover. Some hippie type guy with long hair working at a junk shop. I'm not buying that anymore. This guy is a professional. And I think that he is full of it. Here is his commercial stating, come down to my junk shop. Come down to my record shop. Come down to my music shop. We even accept credit cards. I can't believe it.
Money's boring. Bring us in your old stuff. We buy, sell, and do it all. We even take credit cards. I can't believe it. We even take credit cards. I can't believe it. We even take credit cards. I can't believe it. Trash American style.
I can't believe it. Malcolm Tint can't believe it. The idea of Malcolm Tint accepting credit cards is just something so outlandish, so far removed from reality. It is just almost funny. This is the same guy that buys and sells Revelation Records like a Wall Street stock, which further suggests that he is a professional who works for a record company. And he buys and sells hardcore records, not to get the music out there, not to distribute good music, but he does it as something of a stock. This guy is all about business. He's not about music. It's not the music that matters. So that is why these type of men really hate. They really hate people that make music for the love of music. They have a natural talent for writing music, for doing anything artistic, and they'll do it whether there's money involved in it or not. And these men, like Malcolm Tint and whatever other aliases he may go by, and Anderson Cooper, they hate people like that. They hate people that write music, that create art, just for the sake of music and art. Malcolm Tint and Jeff Pearce hate those type of guys. So this is what the military, the U.S. military, and the English military, and their whole network of Freemasons, this is what they have taken over every aspect of American society. You love politics, you're interested in politics, you're a good leader, you have good ethics or good morals, you have some good ideas. We don't want you in politics. We want people in politics because there is money to be made in politics. Everything else will fall by the wayside. Everything else does not matter. So everything disintegrates in politics, but their greed. You're a good guitar player, huh? You love making music. Does the record company want to support guys like you? No. You're a greedy, self-centered jerk? Yeah, that's the guy that we want to promote in the music business. You don't care about music. You just know how to play an instrument. You will do whatever we tell you. That's the type of guy that we're going to promote in the music industry. So apply their little greedy philosophy to every aspect of American life. And you have the English government and the Freemasonic takeover of every aspect of American culture. Nothing matters but their greed. That is their pinnacle. That is their cap on their pyramid. The dollar bill. And everything that holds that up slowly disintegrates and decomposes and dies. Because the only thing they care about is their dollar. They don't care about political issues. They don't care about real leaders. They don't care about good writing. They don't care about good movies. They don't care about good novels. They don't care about good art. They don't care about good entrepreneur businesses. The only thing they care about is greed. Everything they invade fails once these greedy, self-centered idiots take over. It just happens. Somebody is doing good somewhere around the country. That sends a signal to these legions of psychotic idiots to go over there and infiltrate whatever good is happening independently, and they want to destroy who's ever motivating that, whoever started that. They take over, and after a year or two, that too also starts to fail. It's what these guys do best. Everything else comes second to their dollar. Any department filled with real people doing real work that they could cut, they will. Any corner they could cut to save money or make money, they will. Any quality they could cut to save money, they will. So they just have a machete and they're hacking away at everything that even holds them up, because these men are idiots. So the date is August 20 of 2021. And on Wikipedia, it says that Anderson Cooper was born into the Vanderbilt family in Manhattan. And he graduated from Yale University with a Bachelor of Arts in 1989. So when he was graduating Yale University in 1989, that same year after graduating, he was running around my block in Connecticut acting like a 14-year-old boy. And that culminated in this odd trip to New York City that may or may not have been an abduction attempt. So that's what the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the DuPonts, the Reynolds, the Astors, the Bundys, the Mellons, the Carnegies, that is what they're really into. After they've taken over all businesses and destroyed it all, and shifted all the power back to Europe, they want to run around and abduct little kids while acting like little kids themselves.
Totally. I mean, I really knew nothing about. I mean, I was a big fan of like the Crown series. This is like the Crown on steroids with a whole bunch of Americans. It's it's a multi-generational story. They're larger than life characters. Some are irredeemable and awful. Some have extraordinary accomplishments. Pathological obsession with money that the Commodore had infected subsequent generations.
Well, first of all, more dysfunctional in the Crown is almost physiologically impossible.
Well,
but it's
they
interesting.
Come close, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So pathological obsession with money. What went wrong? Because you really do focus on the fall.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Commodore had what he called a mania for money. He didn't care about anything else. He didn't care about the daughters he had because they wouldn't inherit the Vanderbilt name. He really didn't care about his sons until one of them tricked him in business, and then he suddenly thought, oh, this guy may have something. I'm going to give him all the money. He gave him $100 million when he died in 1877, which was more money than anyone had ever seen before. It was more money than was in the U.S. Treasury.